So welcome and thank you for watching. This is the London system versus Emir 1000 game 3. And as I had shared at the end of the previous video, I wanted to take one more game with Emir because there were some scenarios in this particular game that came up that will serve to further prepare us for some of the more advanced intermediate bots that we will face in our games as we progress through the chess.com intermediate bots utilizing the London in every game. So this opens up again with d4. We'll see a typical setup between white and black utilizing the London and then the intermediate bots. This is a construct or a structure that you'll become very familiar with in the coming videos. But we'll also see black bring the queen out to b6, targeting this b2 pawn. And how do we deal with that? Well, as we've seen in the past, we can just simply move the b pawn to b3 and block, or we can move the queen out to confront and maybe have some kind of exchange. And that's what actually I was hoping to do, is to bring the queen out, have an exchange here, and then I could venture forth in the rest of the game without a queen and see how I would do and deal with two rooks and the minor pieces in order to bring about a checkmate. So it's kind of a personal challenge in that sense, but unfortunately I didn't get that with Emir. Move the queen back. So once again, when we have a flurry of activity, we look at our lines of attack: dark square bishop, light square bishop, knight to e5, being able to attack here or come to the f7 square and fork the queen and the rook. Of course, we can't do that now because we would be taken, but these again are just some of the lines of attack that we can utilize. So in this endeavor, just simply decided to eliminate this free pawn at c5, and Emir responds with g6, probably coming with this dark square fianchetto. Oh, let me redraw that. This dark square fianchetto here that is a part of the intermediate bot repertoire. So we'll move our b knight to d2, a common move, a5. And now we have an opportunity to move our light square bishop here and to pin the knight to the king. This is also a scenario that we will see several times, made possible quite simply because of the a7 pawn moving to a5. Otherwise, we really would not have been able to go down here. So we do this, and Emir responds with a threat. I responded with the h3 pawn. Emir backs off to f5, and now very simply, again, this is a common scenario we will see, and this is what you want to look for, is bringing the knight up to e5, which is a typical attack move of the London, and then targeting this knight at c6, because really what I want to do is take this knight at c6 with my knight, take, and once I take with the bishop, then I can fork the king and the rook at the same time and gain a rook. And so that is the line that I went down. Emir responds by truly coming out with the fianchetto here, and I'm going to take. So Emir responds by moving the bishop back, so we'll take the rook, anticipating that the queen will now take the bishop and we will have gained a rook for a bishop. But to my surprise, Emir moves e6, so that gives me an opportunity to move my bishop to b7 and be protected by the queen. Now, here's another scenario that has occurred in several other games that I've already played with the intermediate bots, and that is the king moves here to the f8 square. So what I'm going to choose to do is move my queen here and pin my pawn at c5 to the king. And my hope is this: by doing this, I can then move my pawn forward, creating check on the king, and also being able to threaten the bishop, the king is going to obviously have to block or move, which gives me the opportunity to capture the bishop. So this is kind of one of those tactics that can be utilized within the game. But Emir saw through this, I guess, and moved to g8. But now I still have this pawn at c5 that can advance. It's protected by the light square bishop, so we will do that. Emir responds by moving the bishop back to e8, and I can just continue on with this. Why? Because the pawn is now protected by the dark square bishop, but now it is targeting the queen, and there really is not much that the queen can do at this point. If you take a few moments to analyze this, you'll see there's really no place that the queen can go. I mean, the queen can move here, but all I'll do is get a queen pushing my pawn to the back rank. If the queen moves up here, it's the same scenario here. Now, probably the queen would then take and sacrifice itself, but then we capture the queen with the bishop. Same thing with this scenario. We just go ahead and capture. So that is what Emir chose. We capture. And what's interesting in this game is I never did push this pawn to the back rank, never had to. Emir responds with a4, and now if you will take a moment again to look at the chessboard, the whole chessboard, hopefully you can see what I saw, and that is the queen can come along this dark square diagonal and just place itself here at e7 and be a tremendous force in the game. And the reason for that is because these black defending pieces will have as their first priority to protect the king, not to attack my king down here at e1. So that's a great advantage by having the queen here, is these pieces just can't come out and start attacking, because that just opens up more avenues for me to attack with my queen, and I already have other pieces, support pieces right there. So one of the things that I noticed is this dark square bishop could come to e5 and actually have a triple pin that could prove to be a part of the endgame scenario, which it does. Emir responds with h6, preparing a escape hatch for the king if it needs it. And I'm going to make this move with my bishop and this triple pin here, and going to utilize that now in the game. d4 should say, and now we're just going to take and take with the queen, and we're going to for the price of one bishop, we're going to eliminate two defenders, and that's the way this scenario went. So once again, you want to look for these scenarios where you can get a 2-for-1. So Emir responds by taking the pawn at e3. This is of no consequence. I'm primarily concerned with wanting to get some support pieces, in particular this knight, to this square at d6, where I can target both the bishop and this pawn and add one more support piece to a potential checkmate. And that's the avenue I went down. Again, this is of no consequence here, this pawn move. And now I am here at d6, and I am targeting these, and we'll have to see how Emir responds. Moves the king to h7. Of course, I cannot move in to this square to put the king in check because of the light squared bishop here. However, I can capture the light square bishop, which I did. And now Emir is in a very difficult position because the rook cannot come over and take the knight. And the reason for that is if he did, I would move down here and take this pawn, putting the king in check and forking the rook and capture the rook there. So Emir chooses not to do that, but rather to move the rook to g8, probably in hopes of maybe pulling up here the rook to g7 in order to block. But right now this is an unprotected piece, so we'll go ahead and take it, check, and the queen or the king moves back to h8. And now I need to look at some scenarios of how to continue on with this attack. The first one that I looked at was the light square bishop taking this e6 pawn and then lending support to the queen, and then the queen goes on down for check and checkmate. There's another venue that we could take, and that is moving the knight here to f6, targeting the rook here, and then, potentially move the queen in with the support of the knight. That's the way that I chose. Either one is fine in this. Emir responds by moving the rook to threaten the queen, but this isn't a threat at all. I'm just going to move down to f8 check. Emir has to block, and of course the scenario comes out as planned, and that is I just move the queen to g8 checkmate. So once again, I hope these brief scenarios that we've looked at here will help prepare you for repetitive scenarios that we'll encounter like them in the future games with the intermediate bots at chess.com. So once again, thank you for watching. Look forward to seeing you in the next video. It'll be Maxim 1000.